Hey y'all, welcome to Ouachita Parish History with Dara. I'm so glad you're here. Let's learn today about some of the Native Americans that lived in Louisiana. So as Europeans arrived in the area that is now Louisiana, there were already societies of thousands of people who lived here for thousands of years in West Carroll Parish. You can actually visit Poverty Point, where they preserve the remains of the community that hit its peak about 1,000 years before Rome conquered the Mediterranean countries. So at the time of European colonization in the 1700s, historians estimate that tens of thousands of natives were living in Louisiana, and they were speaking about 22 different languages. As new diseases were brought in by outsiders and wars and government displacement and competition for land and food, that led to a major decline in the native populations in Louisiana. So that's why we don't have nearly as many Native Americans living here. Today, though, we do have 4 federally recognized tribes in Louisiana, and that's the Jena Band of Choctaw Indians, the Tunica Biloxi Tribe of Louisiana, the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana, and the Chitimacha Tribe of Louisiana, and the state recognizes 11 tribes. The oldest, most significant mound in the area is actually found in Watson Brake. So these Native Americans were part of a group of people that they built mounds. That was a big part of their culture. And so in Watson Brake, it's actually the most ancient mound complex in North America, and it's dated around 3500 BC. It's on private land, and it's not available for viewing. So the Gentry family owns it. There's 8 members of the Gentry family that have owned it since the 1950s. And one of the members has declined to sell it to the state so that it can become, open for public viewing. And so because they haven't opened it for public viewing, they do allow some specific archaeologists to go conduct research, but it's not open to the public. But it's right here in Ouachita Parish, one of the oldest mound complexes in North America. So that's pretty cool. So the mounds there in Watson Brake, they consist of 11 mounds that are connected by ridges. I'm going to have a picture up by the artist Herb Rowe and his conception of what he believes Watson Brake looks like based off of the drawings. And so they're connected. There's 11 mounds connected by ridges. They are 3 to 25 feet in height, and they make an oval that's about 900 feet across. So these mounds, just to put it in perspective, they are older than the Egyptian pyramids, and they're older than Stonehenge in Britain. So if that kind of helps your brain wrap around the age, because sometimes when you hear numbers, you're like, okay, great. So our parish is named after the Ouachita River, and the river is named after the Ouachita tribe that lived alongside it. In 1720, French settlers arrived in what would become Ouachita Parish, and the colonists there, the French colonists, developed a plantation on Bayou Désirde that used African slave labor. And then the Natchez Indians had the Natchez Revolt. That was between 1729 and 1731. And they destroyed the plantations along the Ouachita River. And so the French left at that point. And actually, so we get the word Ouachita from those French settlers. And the pronunciation comes from the French settlers. The name actually comes from the Caddo word Ouachita, and it's Washita. And that Caddo word means good hunting grounds. And so the Indians are where we get our name from, but the pronunciation comes from the French. And you'll find that all through our history. Louisiana is very mixed with Indian names and French names and Spanish names and English names. So the Ouachita Indians were loosely affiliated with the Caddo Confederacy, which would be all through here in Arkansas. If you go to Arkansas, you'll see lots of things named Caddo after Caddo River. They have tons of things named after the Caddo. And so the Ouachita Indians lived along the Ouachita River and the Black River. And then they are believed to have settled at Pargoo Landing, which we'll talk about later, around 1690. And later, this becomes a French trading post, and then ultimately it becomes present-day Monroe as it developed around that area. So in the 1750s, Choctaw Indians began hunting in northern Louisiana, and they expanded their Mississippi territory. And so then around that time, a few French families decided they were going to move north from the Opelousas post on the Red River, so they moved back up towards our area. And then in 1763, France ceded its territories in North America to Great Britain after their defeat in the 7 Years' War. And Spain, knowing that Britain probably wasn't going to come defend these territories, they took over the French territories west of the Mississippi. And so in 1769, 6 years later, Alejandro O'Reilly became the first Spanish governor to rule successfully in West Louisiana. And he claimed Ouachita Parish for Spain. And then in the census of 1769, they recorded that there were 110 white people living in this area. In 1769, Spain also abolished the Indian slave trade and the Indian slavery in their colonies. So you couldn't go and capture any American Indians and use them for slaves. And so because of that later, when the United States acquired the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, some mixed race African American slaves, they won their freedom suits by proving that they had Indian ancestry in their maternal line. Because in the South, it did not matter who your daddy was. It mattered who your mother was. That was how they counted the status of the child, was by the mother. And so if you had a mother or a grandmother or great-grandmother who is an Indian, they were able to prove that they couldn't be held as slaves any longer because they had Indian blood, because of that Spanish law that America had to stand by because of what Spain had already determined. So that's just a little interesting side note off to the side. So another interesting little tidbit is that the Ouachita Indians, they were known for their practice of burying their horses, which is interesting that they would go out of the way to bury their horses like you would a person. And then the Ouachita tribes, they were found, like I said, at Pargou Landing is where they were kind of converged at. So Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne, he was the Sieur de Bienville. He was a French-Canadian colonizer. He encountered the Ouachita people in 1700. And he first met members of the tribe as they were transporting salt to the Tinsaw. And Bienville traveled to the principal Ouachita village, which he described as housing 70 people in 5 houses. And the Ouachita tribe, they ended up assimilating into the Nacogdoches tribe by the 1720s. And today, those tribes' descendants are enrolled in the Caddo Nation of Oklahoma. So they're not affiliated with Louisiana anymore, just because of when the United States pushed the Indian tribes to go to reservations, then the individual tribes started assimilating together as one larger group. So one thing to note just about Ouachita, the Ouachita River. The Ouachita River begins as a small mountain stream in the Ouachita Mountains near Mena, Arkansas. I've actually been up there and seen this little stream. My daughter and I just happened to be driving by there, and we were like, it says Ouachita River there. And we stopped and we looked, and it was literally a stream. And we parked on the side of the road and got out of the car and went and kind of played in it, just because we were like, this is crazy that this is the Ouachita River. It's so little. So the Ouachita River is 600 miles long, and it runs through south central Arkansas and northeast Louisiana, and then it flows into the Black River at Jonesville in Louisiana. And let's see, it says the Ouachita was originally, we talked about that. So the Indians observed at a certain time of the year that the Tinsaw River would seemingly flow across the Ouachita into the Little River. And at this junction, the rivers formed an X design. The Indians considered this to be a mystical sign, and they built one of the largest Indian ceremonial mounds in North America at the point where these three rivers meet. So the river is intrinsically connected to the Ouachita Indians, and really not just the Ouachita, the Choctaw Indians as well, and the Caddo Indians. And so much of our history is intertwined with different people groups and different nations. And so that's our first little history lesson. And as we go through more, I will, you'll have more and more history about our great area. But I hope you enjoyed that. And if you have questions, you can put them here and I'll research them and see if I can find the answer. I might have the answer in one of my binders. But I hope you have a great day, and I hope this was interesting. Talk to you later. Bye.